you think about this, he redefined the word, the Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi redefined the word neutral in two ways. First, at the beginning, said that there's no such thing as neutral because it depends how you relate to neutral. You can either take the neutral, right, to the sitra achra, to the other side, and turn it into impure or even bad or negative, or you can take the neutral, like eating, like sports, actions like that, and take it to the holy side. If you eat in order to worship Hashem in a better way, in a healthier way, then your neutral becomes holy. That's one definition of neutral, right? There's no such thing as neutral because it can be taken in either direction. But then he also said that there's no such thing as neutral, and that's a deeper, a more profound thought. And that is because really, God is one. And what this means, when we explain this verse of Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that God is indeed one, we explain that he's not just one singular, but he's one that encompasses every part of creation, every iota of creation. There is God in everything. Now, because there is God in everything, really there is no neutral. If you see something that's neutral, or moreover, if you now see something that is even attached to the sitra achra, it doesn't mean that it's sitra achra. Maybe that's just external surface. It doesn't mean that neutral is neutral. Maybe that's, again, just the external surface. But if we dig deep enough, then we'll be able to find God, because God is one and he's embedded in every part of his creation. Now, sometimes God can be revealed, like in the neutral, like in when he called Klipat Noga, if you recall. In the Sitra Achra, over there, he's too encaged. When Mashiach will come, then he'll be revealed. But that's another way to look at neutral. Neutral, not just, okay, depends how you look at it, how you use it, but neutral, I think, in a way that neutral really is an illusion. It's an external layer, because God is even in the sports. God is even in our office. God is even in our bedroom. God is even in our kitchen. And really the task of man is to be able to reveal that God within every part of creation. So that was the big idea, right? At the bottom of 162, 163. Let's continue. Continue here, as you said, Margaret, middle of page 163. Anyone? Does anyone want to read?
The holy side is nothing but eminence, an extension of holiness of the Holy One, blessed be He. There is no inherent holiness other than that of God. Something might be of value in the practical sense, but it is not holy. Holiness belongs exclusively to God, and the side of holiness contains no realities that are inherently holy. Only realities that rely their holiness from God.
Right. Thank you, Ronnie. I think it was the first time you read. I love it.
Was the first time you finally sent me the...
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay, that's right. Thank you. But I just want to pause here for a second, because these are, of course, deep words. And I think what the Tanya does, and what Rabbi Schnetzler's commentary is, that he redefines also the word holiness. You know, holiness, we think, is something that is maybe, I don't know, something that is saint, something that is consecrated. All that might be true. But in Judaism, holiness, really, even the word for holiness, kadosh, kedusha, means being separate. That's what it means, being separate. That's why, for example, under chuppah, right, the man says to a woman, arei at mekudeshet, that you are sanctified li to me. Now, what does that mean? Does she become holy under chuppah? What does that mean? What really means is that now this woman becomes separated from all other women to be in this union, to be separated from all of them, and to be one with her husband. Same, of course, with her husband, but that is what holiness means, to be separated, right? Now, when there's no inherent other than that of God, what this is saying really is that the whole world should be separated for God, should be exclusive to God. But we don't see that the whole world is exclusive to God. We don't see some individuals that are exclusive to God. We don't see some countries. Look at Afghanistan. It's not exclusive to God with the chaos that is happening there. There are parts of the world that are not exclusive. So what that means is that it still hasn't been, that piece of God still hasn't been revealed. if it can be revealed, that it becomes exclusive to God. Then it becomes holy. And I think that's the definition of a holy man. By the way, Rabbi Steinsaltz has a book on the Lubavitcher Rebbe called My Rebbe, and I would warmly recommend everyone to read it. But there he has a whole chapter about holiness, and where he speaks, he elaborates on these words that he writes here. He speaks much more about holiness, but his point is that holiness, when we refer the word holiness to a human being, what we're really saying is that that human being has taken upon himself to separate himself from any material desires and needs and make himself exclusively available to God. That's what holiness is. Because really, that's what holiness means. Yes, Rabbi Eisen.
So to or with, etc., is God exclusively related? If God
Say that again.
If God is Hakadosh Baruch Hu,
Yeah.
to whom or with whom or how is God exclusively related to A, B, C, D? Exclusively to the Jewish people, exclusively to the world. Where does God get his, her, its separateness from?
So I think it comes from us. Unfortunately, we created that separateness. If we really want to go to the root of it, the sin of Adam and Eve created that separateness. Before that, we were living in paradise, where really there was no separation between God and the world. And there, God indeed was felt in every area of the world. That's paradise. But then we sinned. And through the sin, we created this division or this separateness from God. And then we sinned more. And then God had to bring a flood. And then we sinned more. And each time there are indeed great people. And in general, with every mitzvah that we do, we reveal God once again in the world as it was before. And really the idea of Mashiach in general, of Mashiach coming, is this idea in which the world will finally have been completely returned to God, so to speak. That unity of God in the world has finally been revealed, that now Mashiach is ready to come. That doesn't mean that we have to actually, well, some people, might fall into despair. Well, we live in one of the worst generations, or maybe some may say one of the worst generations. And God is not seen in many places in the world. Doesn't mean that that's it. Mashiach is not going to come. But because if you think of all of the good actions that are done, not just in this generation, but all the good actions that are added really to all previous generations, then there are really indeed many divine revelations that have already occurred in, I think, every part of the world. I remember I shared with you the story of my sister doing a bris 400 kilometers away from Mar del Plata in Argentina, revealing that part of God in part of the world maybe that has never been exposed to that mitzvah and to that divine revelation. So I'm saying with all these little deeds, we are spiritually preparing the world for Mashiach. We might not see it physically, but spiritually it's certainly happening. And hopefully, with one more mitzvah, maybe with the mitzvah right now of us learning Torah, we're tipping the scale and Mashiach will finally come. But the idea of Mashiach again is where that separateness does not exist anymore, because we have corrected the sins that cause separateness at the beginning and reunited this world with God and ensured that he can fully reveal himself. Yes, I know, William, you raised your hand, and then Ronnie, you raised your hand. Yes. William, you're on mute. You're on mute. I can't hear you.
I didn't raise my hand, maybe just scratch my head, but
Oh.
I'll let Ron proceed first.
All right, very good.
I'm out here in Edmonton visiting my daughter.
Oh, that's so nice.
Canada.
Beautiful.
That's so nice. Okay, you see, you're revealing God in that part of the world too. Your granddaughter also probably is, maybe in the most pure way, like children, right? Okay, Ronnie.
The word revealing, and who is doing the revealing? When God is revealed to us, that we are revealing God, we as an individual, nobody's revealing God for us. We have to do the revealing. And the revealing comes from accepting God as God is God.
Absolutely, right.
And
But, you know,
once we accept it, that's it.
Right.
It's and would you say this is true? Once God is revealed, God is always revealed to someone.
right,
That it never goes back.
right. But I would say the difference between acceptance, which I agree is probably step one, and revelation is that acceptance is passive. Revelation, in this context at least, is active. You know,
Absolutely.
they say that there's no atheist in foxholes. And the Talmud says that a burglar, even when he's about to do his burglary, even when he's hiding and about to do his burglary, he believes in God. Maybe he even admits a prayer to God saying, please make me successful in my burglary. Now, the burglar accepted God. Look, he's speaking to God. He has faith in God. The atheist in the foxhole also, he's accepting God. So does that mean that's enough? No. Once you've accepted God, then you have to reveal him. How do you reveal him? By not proceeding with your burglary in this case, but rather by stopping yourself. Self-control also reveals God. Maybe it's one of the great ways to reveal God, because by controlling yourself, and in this specific example, of course, there's so many, 613 ways to reveal God. But by controlling yourself, what you're basically saying is that I accept that there's a higher authority here. It's not about me and my impulses. It's about what God wants from me. Maybe in a way, this self-control can create even more of a revelation than other mitzvahs, especially the self-control is very hard to exercise. But I don't want to deviate to self-control here, but acceptance is step one, and then active revelation is step two.
I have a lot of difficulty with the concept of the Mashiach. It's something that's always bothered me.
Okay.
One of the walls in Jerusalem, one of the gates in Jerusalem, has actually been bricked off by the Ottoman Empire, because that is the wall that they believed the Messiah will come through with his donkey.
Right.
So they bricked it off so the Messiah would not be able to enter.
Right.
But
To be more exact, that's right. The gate of compassion.
But I have difficulty when I go to Israel and I see signs everywhere throughout the country of Rabbi Schneerson. He's the Messiah. This is a man who's passed away, who did a lot of good work.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The Messiah, and people going around, I find it disturbs me from the point of view of Judaism, from the point of view of faith. It's something that is beyond me accepting someone who's passed away, and everyone, not everyone, but these signs proclaiming him to be the Messiah. I find that is just something that I get turned off very badly.
No, I understand. And look, I think that you mentioned two different aspects of the Messiah here. There's the belief in the coming of the Messiah, which is one of the 13 principles of faith, as we all know by Maimonides. And then you have the identity of the Messiah. There's no belief in believing that so-and-so is a Messiah. There's no principle of faith as such. And if people do that, then they can speak for themselves. I'm not going to speak for them. I will speak about the belief, that the first aspect of your comment, and that is the belief in the coming of the Mashiach. It's a belief, particularly because, and I'm glad you confess that sometimes you have difficulties in understanding this concept. And I'll tell you what, I also have difficulties understanding this concept. And I think most people, if not all people, have difficulties understanding this concept, because it's almost negates the reality as we know it. But I think that's why also Maimonides placed it as a principle of faith. What is faith in Judaism? Faith in Judaism is not naivete, where I just believe because I feel like believing. Faith only kicks in once I've exhausted all intellectual options. And sometimes I've exhausted this option. Really, can Mashiach come when there's so much evil in this world? I can't understand. I myself, how's this going to happen? Now I can study all about it. So intellectually, I might start getting it, but I still won't get it fully. So that's where faith kicks in. I say, all right, fine. I have to believe. And I have to say,
the Reform and I would say also the conservative movement have a different concept of the Messiah. Their concept is the Messiah is an era where there'll be peace, where there'll be love and brotherhood and so on. It's not an individual riding on a white donkey.
Right. Well, whether he'll ride on a white donkey or not, that's a different question. But look, there's multiple aspects. Certainly, one aspect of the Mashiach coming is that there will be an era of peace. And, the prophet even says the wolf will live with the lamb. It's like
I'd rather be the wolf.
I'd rather be the wolf than the lamb. That's correct. And then there's the deliverer of the news, and the one that will be leading us into Israel, and that's the Mashiach. And again, it's a principle of faith. By the way, that the wolf living with the lamb already existed in that concept already existed in the times of Menachem Begin, when he was the prime minister of Israel. You know that in the Jerusalem zoo, the wolf lived with the lamb. And one day he was taking Henry Kissinger, I think, on a tour, and he said, "Look, we have the fulfillment of this prophecy here, that the wolf is living with the lamb in the Jerusalem zoo." He couldn't believe it. He said, "Yes, please take me." And he sees a wolf living with the lamb in the Jerusalem zoo. So he turns to Menachem Begin. He says, "How do you do that? That's messianic time." And Menachem Begin says, "It's very easy. Every day we feed the wolf with a different lamb."
When Zionism started in the early eras, in the time of Herzl, when he organized political Zionism, it was one of the only times that the ultra-Orthodox and the Reform agreed that they were anti-Zionist, anti-Israel. The Ger rabbi, the Ger Hasid, condemned Zionism because it's hastening the Messiah, while the Reform said, we don't need Zionism because we have Jerusalem and Berlin.
Right, okay.
Or Vilna, or whatever.
Fine, yeah. All right, well, I don't want to deviate too much, but look, Baruch Hashem, 2 Jews, 7 opinions, but I will say this, 2 Jews, 7 opinions, but 1 heart. So we'll focus on that oneness of the heart. And then those who have different opinions, we can ask them. I'm not going to be their spokesperson. Okay, let's continue here, bottom of page 163. Again, speaking about how holiness is separating yourself from anything that may negate God and becoming exclusive or belonging exclusively to God. So let's continue here. And the Holy One, blessed be He. Does anyone want to read?
And the Holy One, blessed be He, dwells only on something that abnegates itself completely to Him. In Ingrid HaKadosh, the author explains that dwelling of the divine presence is not present in everything. The divine presence is everywhere, for the entire world is filled with His presence. There are no boundaries or limits to the truth that there is none else besides Him. But when speaking of Hashra'ah, or dwelling of the divine presence, we're speaking of a manifest revelation of godliness, of a thing becoming a vessel of divinity, something that visibly relates to God. The dwelling of the divine presence in the certain object or reality implies that the divine presence is not only there, but that it operates and manifests itself through that thing. Not everything can serve as a conduit of the divine, but it must have a certain quality that makes it a vessel. This quality is utter self-abnegation to God.
Right. So what he's saying is that there's a difference between dwelling and presence, right? The dwelling of God and the presence of God. So the presence of God, God is present everywhere. But when when Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi here says that the Holy One, blessed be, dwells, not he's not present, dwells only on something that abnegates itself completely to Him. It speaks about how God completely manifests himself. So really, if you're abnegated to him, then God can dwell on you. Maybe that's why the Talmud says, speaking of two extremes, I'll mention one extreme and then the other extreme. But the Talmud says that a person who's arrogant, then that him and I cannot dwell together. Why? Because the person that's arrogant takes up the space of the entire room. He doesn't let God in. Now, does that mean that God is not found in that room? God, again, God's great. That's God's creation. That room is also God's creation. But it means that God can't really dwell, can't manifest himself, because the guy's arrogant. On the other hand, I want to go back to Maimonides. He says that in later times, which is our times, the prophecy will be eradicated from this world. There won't be any prophets, with two exceptions: crazy people and children. Crazy people and children have the potential of being prophets. Now, why is that? And I think
Thank
again,
you, Rabbi.
Sorry?
Thank you.
There you go. You just had your grandson there with you. I saw. Maybe he's a prophet, will you? But why is that? Because they're not self-preoccupied. It's not about them. They're completely open to God and to his wonders. Crazy people have left their intellect. It's not about me, what. They live in a metaphysical world already, so to speak. So the potential of God's dwelling in them is much stronger than, adults. When they grow up, we have bills to pay. We are very preoccupied with ourselves. We can't really separate ourselves completely for God, to, as he says here, to abnegate ourselves completely to him. It's hard, but children and crazy people have much greater potential to do that. So again, that's just speaking about the dwelling of God. But I will say this, although we may not, because it might sound, when we read these words, and at least that's the thought that is coming to my mind, it might sound very discouraging. So what? If I am not completely abnegated to God, God will never dwell. Me and God will always be separate entities. I mean, I'll never be able to really become that full channel for God. And I don't believe that that's the case. I believe that although we can't abnegate ourselves to God completely 24/7, as most people can't, there are times in the day in which we can. There are certain actions with which we can. So maybe during prayer, I can be in that state, and then God can dwell fully in me and through me. Or when I do a specific mitzvah, and then I'm abnegating myself completely. So I might not be a 24/7. Let's add that thought, because I think it's important so that we don't become discouraged. But it might not be a 24/7 state, but we can make it a 3-hour state, a 5-hour state, or whatever it may be. Yes, Ronnie.
In listening to you say that, yes, and I'm just making a comment, not saying I'm right or wrong,
Sure.
but yes, we have the ability to turn, and I don't like saying it like this, turn God on and off. But
Right.
the important thing is God is dwelling within us. And once God is dwelling within us, it's only then that we can turn God on. Comment on that.
No, that absolutely. So I think that's the next paragraph. In fact, that's what I was reading ahead here. I think that's what Rabbi Steinsaltz says. So Ronnie, very as you say in Hebrew, kivanta ledat gdolim, that your focus was in the direction of great people. Yes, Rabbi Eisen.
So a question, a clarification. Is it we who turn God on or off, or is it we who turn ourselves on or off to God's presence?
Very good. I think it's the latter. Certainly the latter. That we
What is the difference?
I know, I'm trying to think that.
Yeah, Rabbi Eisen, go. I mean, I understood it one way, but I want to hear yours.
Obviously, the difference is when we say, to say that we turn God on or off, makes God sort of a victim of our circumstances. Whereas if we say we are opening ourselves up to God, we are turning ourselves on or off, means that God is there continually, consistently, without any kind of you might say, affect by us, except that once in a while we open our eyes and let God in. It is Rabbi Luce said, there are times during the day when we don't, we can't, we have to function. There are I-it moments, as Boo Boo would say, but there are also I-thou moments when we can open ourselves. And sometimes the same thing as we're going through it is we're just going through the day, but then all of a sudden we look back and reflect and say, wait a minute, God was there with me. It's the footprints in the sand kind of hallmark moment. But if God is God, then God is eternal,
Right.
and always there with us and for us. The question is, are we there ready to embrace that presence? So if we put God on and off, then that puts God in a different situation, dependent on us. Whereas if we say we're turning ourselves on or off, means God's there for us, and are we going to be there?
Right. Yeah, I think it's more the latter. I will say this also, you know, there's so many intricacies here that I understand. I understand the concept here that was spoken about of turning God on and off, or we turning ourselves, or turning our backs to God on and off, so to speak. I mean, yes, I know we're almost wired with that consciousness of switches, right? On and off. I turn the light on this morning and then I'll turn it off when I leave the office. But I think there's much more than just the on and off switch when it comes to God. Sometimes God can be super on. Sometimes God can be between on and off. Sometimes I'm aware of God, but I'm not completely right now embracing God. So it's not that I'm off completely. I personally believe that there is no off switch when it comes to certainly the Jewish soul. I think that the Jewish soul, like the Song of Songs says, Ani yeshena v'libi er. I am asleep, but my heart is awake. Sometimes my heart is awake. It's just that I'm asleep. Now, is that an off switch? Not necessarily. Physically, maybe it's an off switch, but my heart is awake. Libi er. So I don't think there's an off switch completely. Let's just add that comment. But I also want to add one more thing, and that is that, you know, we there's another wrong thought that can come from these words. We spoke about the wrong thought that can come by saying, oh, that means that if I'm not 24/7 abnegated to God, then maybe I'm not holy. So no, as we said, there could be hours throughout the day in which you can have that exclusive belonging to God. But there's another thought that I also would like to squash right now and nip it in the bud. And that is that we may think that God is compartmentalized. And we spoke about this 2 classes ago, that God only belongs to the synagogue. And only when I'm in the synagogue, then I'm exclusive to God and then I'm holy. No, that's wrong.
You're frozen.
Well there, enable him to manifest himself, like we said, there, and act in a holy way with the full recognition that God is there, not just present, but God is dwelling, and ensuring that therefore every action in your bedroom and every action in your kitchen is divine. Then in a way, we can also ensure that God dwells while we're making supper for our children, or while we're getting dressed in the morning. I think that's important. You know, I will mention this. You might not know that I'm mentioning him, but I'm going to mention him nonetheless. There's a CEO of a big company in our congregation. Many of you know him, Thomas Gorney. And not long ago, he took upon himself yet another mitzvah. You know, we encourage here at CBT to always, I encourage myself too, to always increase our mitzvahs, to always take upon ourselves a good resolution. But he took upon himself the mitzvah of praying mincha in the afternoon, praying the afternoon prayer, which you can do up until sunset, right? And he was telling me just last week that it's amazing the impact it's had, this mitzvah. He didn't measure the impact it could have, not just on himself, but on his business. Why so? Because it's happened to him now many times where he's had a meeting going into the evening and he's had to tell people, imagine the CEO of a company, he's had to tell people, sorry, I need a break. I need to go and speak with God. In the middle of the meeting, you know, talking big decisions or whatever, who knows? But that in and of itself makes an impact. Yeah. He was sharing that with me. So I think that's one of the ways we can bring God into a boardroom of CEOs. It's astounding, but it's beautiful. So again, let's not think that it's just being exclusive to God in a synagogue or in a very specific act, but it could be even in the mundane, which is really consistent with everything we've been saying in this chapter. Okay, yes, Rabbi Eisen.
You're on mute.
Yeah,
You're on mute.
I'm mute. Yeah.
No, it's interesting to me that someone would have that experience. Unfortunately, I think in speaking with some of our non-Jewish colleagues, I often say the Jews daven, you pray. But if you talk especially to the evangelical friends in our community, very often they will say, let's pray about that. Or at a meeting, they'll stop and they'll say, wait, before we vote, let's stop and pray. Which is sort of opening their eyes, what's godly about this? How can we make it a holy moment, so to speak? When I was in undergraduate school, I had a friend who was a very devout Catholic. And whenever we had a lot of classes together, and whenever I'd see him, we'd walk to the building. Before he walked into the building, he'd pause, look up, and then go in. As this is his way of kissing a mezuzah, so to speak. He just said a little prayer to keep himself focused.
Right. Very nice.
That's how we enable ourselves to keep our eyes open and turn the switch on. Beautiful,
really beautiful. I don't know if I mentioned this, but it's one of the stories I keep with me. But there's an ex, or they call themselves addicts all the time. But there's an ex-addict in our community who was addicted to alcohol. He's been, thank God, sober for over 20 years. I think many of you know him. And he told me that what enabled him at the very beginning, right? He was going to AA meetings, but it was still very hard to control the temptation. But what finally turned that switch on in him was a suggestion that was given to him by his mentor. What did his mentor tell him? His mentor said to him, look, I know, Charlie, that it may be hard, especially when you go to social parties that you have to go to, bar mitzvahs, wedding, or whatever it may be, and you see alcohol there. It's very hard. The temptation is very strong. So here's my suggestion. Before you walk into the room, open the door, and then wait a few seconds, and first allow God to enter the room. Once you know that God is in that room, you'll behave in a better way. And he's been doing that ever since for 20 plus years now.
That's great.
And I think that, consistent with what you're saying, but I think it's really the words of the Tanya coming alive here, that we're enabling God to come into social parties. God is there. And that focus, that awareness, that active revelation of God within the room is really what is reunifying God and ensuring that separateness that was created is now being dissolved. So it's an